All right, if we can get everyone to find their seats, and if you see a gap, again, just a reminder, we are at max capacity for this place, if assuming everyone shows up, so squeeze in and make room for others as they come in. So, welcome to Devopsdays Columbus. Thank you all for showing up, and what?
OH!
I don't understand why we do that. I'm so sorry.
I told him we should do it. He's like, no.
No. Anyways, hopefully everyone's going to have a really great time. If you haven't downloaded the guidebook app, please do so. It has information about the presenters, the topics, which rooms things are going to be in. We have a little bit of a change in the format for today. Normally, the Devopsdays is a single track in just this room. We're going to have some breakouts, some workshops. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to track everything down. So I suck at doing openings, so yeah.
Hand it over.
Huh? I'm doing okay. Thank you.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
Just relax. Breathe.
I've not had enough coffee to relax.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you haven't been up since 4 or 5 in the morning?
4?
Okay.
Yeah, about 4.
Well, then you should be awake.
No. I don't wake up till like 7.
Okay, so welcome to Devopsdays. This is our 5th year. We're real excited about being here. So we expanded our venue. We used to be at the Bluestone, and we decided to change because we got a lot of feedback saying I'd love to have more opportunities. I'd like to have different things to do. Trying to, before, as Bill had said, in the afternoon, we just had one track. This year we have 3 different tracks going on in the afternoon, so we kind of expanded it, which meant we had to get a new venue. So we have over 500 attendees enrolled. We have over 100 companies represented. We also were able, because we changed venue, to increase our sponsorship. So we definitely thank all of our sponsors. By having the sponsors, we can keep our cost to the attendees lower. So sponsors, make sure you stop by and see them. What are you showing me? Okay. So we've had check-ins.
Yeah, this is 356 check-ins. That's actually more than we could have capacity for at Bluestone.
Absolutely. And this is our 2nd year for day 0. So the last couple years, we've had a leadership summit the day before, just to bring leaders together and have them talk about DevOps. So that's worked very well. What else would you like to say, since you now have a mic?
And as Maddie pointed out, I have a coffee. Far more important, guys. Make sure you drink up. Stay caffeinated. I don't have anything else to say. Sorry.
That's okay. So speaking of our sponsors, here's all of our sponsors, whether they're gold, silver, or bronze. So thank you so much. And make sure you visit them. We've got some right outside, and then we've got some over to the left side. My left side, but still be left side. So make sure you step out and see them. That hallway over there.
That hallway over there.
If you go to the right, you're going to hit a dead end. So go to the left.
There you go.
True.
It's all a matter of perspective, right?
Exactly. Would you like to?
Huh? So apparently this is now the 10th year of Devopsdays events. I didn't even realize that, which is pretty amazing. How many cities are we in now? I don't even know, Maddie. Almost 80 cities across the globe. Pretty awesome.
So speaking of that.
Oh, and speaking of how many events there are, that doesn't even look like 80 little dots. Yeah, I have no idea where that map came from. I mean, they're geotags. Huh? He broke that code. Everybody.
Well, you need to fix
it. In case
it.
you didn't hear that. Oh, yeah, the guidebook thing that I mentioned. Yeah, see, I'm really good at staying on task. So for those of you that haven't gotten to it yet, so if you have your badge, which hopefully everybody actually has a badge, if you flip it over, there's a little QR code. So if you download the guidebook app, and then with the guidebook app, scan that, it will bring you the schedule. You can download it and have it on your phone. Yes, you do have to download the guidebook app first. That link is a guidebook URL prefix. I forget what that's called, but handler, whatever. And then I guess if you don't use the QR code, you need to put the passphrase of DoD CBus 2019 in there. So, next. Open spaces, fun. The fun part. This is where everyone in the attending actually gets to control the content of what we talk about. Let's see. So the general idea is it's focused around self-organizing groups. It sounds chaotic, and it sort of kind of is, but it's actually a lot of fun. The general idea is we work kind of like a Kanban board, so we take topics, we get ideas from people in the crowd, or are we doing a location for that, or is that just on the guidebook app?
I think it's on the guidebook app.
See, I'm scatterbrained. Hi, guys. Yeah, so it is a part of the guidebook app this year. That was a thing that was changed since the last time I tried to do all this crazy stuff. So put ideas in, and we will then do a voting process. Is the voting on the guidebook app as well, or is
Yes, it is.
Wow! See, it's almost like I actually know this what I'm talking about, which I don't. So then we'll figure out based on the number of votes, we'll figure out where to have everybody placed. The hamburger menu, is that actually a thing?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
So this is just kind of giving you in the guidebook how to actually submit your open spaces. So make sure that you're submitting them. For each day, it will change what's going on in the afternoon for the open spaces. We'll still have 2 other tracks going on, but the open spaces will be driven by you as a participant and your ideas. Now, if you submit an idea and it's actually rises to the top and gets all the votes, please participate in that event because you're the one that submitted it, so you're kind of driving that conversation. So please be there. Well, that's important, right?
It's suggested, but I didn't think it was required.
Well, then don't submit anything, Bill. Come on.
So my submission is going to apparently have to be how to organize myself. So, yeah.
So from here, definitely start submitting your open space ideas. It's important. Get them out there because after lunch is when we actually will need to actually start deciding which ones rise to the top and which ones are going forward. So it's important to submit them now so that people can start voting on which ones they want to actually go with, right?
And also don't forget, if your topic doesn't get in for today, that doesn't mean that it can't be used for tomorrow. So get your ideas in, stuff that you're passionate about, stuff that you want to learn about, or just something you want to talk about.
Absolutely. Restrooms. So there's restrooms all over the place. Just look around. I know there's some right out here. There's some over to the left-hand side. Just look around. I mean, they're all over the place. So it's not like our prior venue where they were kind of upstairs and, bottlenecked. They're all over the place here. Lunches will be provided from noon to 1 every day. The afternoon snack is around 3. And then tonight we will have a happy hour in the ballroom. So you should have received drink tickets, a couple of drink tickets, which you will use for this after party. It's not for today. It's not for when you're walking around and wanting a drink or something. It's for the after party.
And apparently David wants to talk about something about the after party, I think, maybe?
Oh. All right, so in the after party, there's just a couple things I just want to let you know about, is that for those of you who don't drink alcohol, there'll be a mocktail option. Also, for those of you who have been sitting all day, there will be a seated massage in the ballroom, so you'll see that. So there's 10 stations. Take advantage of that, because I know a lot of you are kind of hunched over, sitting down, and you're probably at your computer all the time, so take advantage of that. Also...
Can you do that again?
What? Oh, hunch? Hunched over.
Yeah, really do it.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's more like this. You're always like this all the time. Okay. Also, we need to, as Devopsdays, we like to give back to the community. So we need your help in the Clinton room during happy hour, it's down the hall to the left before the downstairs. There'll be Build-A-Bear, so you'll make teddy bears, and make toiletry kits. These are we'll be donating them to Children's Hospital. So obviously the the teddy bears are for the kids, and the toiletry kits are for the parents of the kids. So take advantage of that. We got a lot of them to put together. So that's in the Clinton room during the happy hour. So, all right.
What else is going on in happy hour?
Well, obviously there's food and drink, but also, we have live music.
Okay.
Live music in the ballroom. Yeah. So
Yeah.
come, join. No, parking is free, and they won't even allow, I mean, they're fine with not having parking passes on there because we pretty much take up the whole building. So we good.
Great question. Thanks for asking that. Because in the past, if you've ever been to the Fawcett Center, you always had to put a little piece of paper in your window showing that you're allowed to be here. Because, like David said, because we've actually taken over the entire, almost the entire building, they did not require it. So you're good there. Wi-Fi, that's important.
So thankfully, by being at Fawcett Center, we are on OSU's network. So jump onto the Wi-Fi at OSU SSID and go through the registration, and you should be good to go. This room is pretty densely packed. I think I counted 5 or 6 access points. So hopefully there's enough coverage for everybody. And just bear in mind, there's 500 people here too, so we might have some fun congestion stuff, but we'll see. We're going to be load testing their access points for them today, so, and their internet connection. Oh, the live stream, yes. So, as with our normal tradition, we are going to be live streaming. Everyone say hi to Kirk in the back. He's our video guy, and he's also taking care of streaming this up to YouTube. These links, we'll shoot out a tweet with the links as well so people can pass it around. So pass it to your coworkers, your friends, people that weren't able to register, and so on, and get the links. We will have, for each morning and afternoon, there's 2 different URLs to get to. You can also get to it by going to the Devopsdays Columbus Twitter, our YouTube account, and then you should be able to see the links there. Those videos will be posted and be preserved, and then Kirk will upload nicer, higher quality stuff per speaker with links to slides and that kind of stuff after the event. You doing code of conduct or mine?
Go for it.
Okay. So as with all other DevOps Days events that I'm at least aware of, is there is a code of conduct. Go to devopsdays.org/conduct. The general principle is be respectful of each other and be welcoming. If anybody has any concerns, find one of us. I think everybody, including me this year, is actually wearing a DevOps Days, this lighter blue shirt. Find one of us. You can also contact Michael Ducey or Sherry Stebbins. Stevens?
Yeah, you said
Stevens?
it right. Stebbins.
Stebbins, okay, I got it this time.
Yes.
So this is Sherry. I'm not sure where Michael Ducey is, but he's running around here somewhere. He was helping check in a lot of people earlier.
And speaking of that, did we introduce ourselves? No.
No. See
So I'm
how
Sherry
awesome I can do
Stebbins.
this? Yeah. I'm Bill Schwanitz.
And we have David, Kyle,
David,
JD.
How do you pronounce your name again, David? Your last name? La Lusa? La Lusa, okay. Yes.
That's why I just said David.
Oh my God, you just started a new thing. Actually, I think I would prefer that over the whole OHIO thing. See, there I actually said it that time, but I wasn't like energetic about it.
I know.
Does that count?
No,
Good.
because you didn't let them respond. You said it all.
Okay.
We have Renee sitting in the
feel
audience.
better.
She's waving. Who else is in the audience? I'm looking, scanning. I'm not seeing anybody else.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people still running around trying to get things organized, getting the sponsor set up. So I think they're out there.
Yep.
Yep. And I think that is it.
Yep.
So
Oh, and should we go off script? Can I go off script?
you may.
Everybody wave hi to Ashton over in the corner. She's going to be doing a graphic recording. So Ashton does really awesome stuff. It's really fun to watch her work, or at least I think it's really fun. So she's going to be drawing while the presenters are up here talking. And then we're going to have these on display somewhere again. Yeah, so they'll be on display someplace. I believe the ones from the Leadership Summit are actually in the area where we have the snacks. I saw at least one of them in there. So definitely check that stuff out. It's really neat to watch.
Yeah, it's cool because as they're presenting, she's actually drawing.
Yep.
And then we give them to the speakers.
Yes, we do.
So the speakers get to take that home or back to their office with them. And I know working at Nationwide, I've seen a couple of them back in the office, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are neat. I'm totally jealous. See, that alone makes me want to actually get out and present, just so I can get one of those.
So is there anything that we forgot that you have questions about?
Total silence.
Yeah.
Anybody? All right.
I think we were good and we covered everything.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. So first up, we have Courtney Kistler. Everyone say hello, Courtney. All right. Give us just a moment. We're going to get things set up. Thank you.
All right. Good morning. I'm super excited to be back here. I was actually here for the very first Devopsdays Columbus, so it's an honor to be back here on year 5. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey and specifically how it relates to leadership evolution and kind of what I've learned throughout my career and journey through DevOps and Lean. Did it change? Okay, perfect. So just super quick intro about me. So I've been in the technology industry for over 20 years. I started as an engineer in infrastructure, actually, so on the ops side, and navigated through engineering leadership and then spent about 14 years at Nordstrom, so long-time retail, and I know there's a lot of retail here, so another exciting discovery. When I left Nordstrom, I was in a VP role supporting our customer-facing engineering team, so basically anything that touched the customer, including the store technology, as well as the e-commerce and loyalty and personalization platforms. So I'm going to go a little deeper into what I learned when I was there, because I went on a pretty fun journey while I was at Nordstrom. And then I decided to take a role at Starbucks, which was super exciting to lead the retail technology team there. So basically that was global POS, so I was excited to have a global opportunity. And if you drink Starbucks or use their mobile app, I had a connection to that too, because that's all kind of integrated into POS at Starbucks. Then, almost exactly 2 years ago, it's my anniversary this week, I moved to Nike. So now I'm at Nike. I started in the digital engineering organization, very similar to the role that I had when I left Nordstrom. And recently, actually mid-June, so I guess it's not that recent anymore, took a new role where I'm leading what we call our move domain, which is supply chain, inventory, order management, logistics globally. So that's my new role at Nike, which is super exciting because, as I said, I'm very passionate about lean. And a lot of the lean concepts started in supply chain and logistics. So it's pretty fun to be in a role where I get to apply that to software. And I try really hard to be a lifelong learner. So I'm going to start the story grounding in the context that I was operating under at Nordstrom for about the first 9 years that I was at the organization. And this is intended to just give you some visibility to how we were operating at that time. All about cost. So traditional kind of IT organization, annual planning, project-based funding, a lot of shared services. We had a lot of dependency on contract and ITO vendors at the time. And we were doing like typical project release type cycle. So once a year, sometimes 18-month type releases. Here's what I learned though, because no matter what, it's like no matter what context you're under, you learn something. So the structured methods that we were using actually were pretty successful. It's like managing budget and scope was, we had a high success rate. Now the challenge was it didn't always equate to customer value. So we were delivering and had those boxes checked, but it didn't really equate to customer value. Our poor production support teams were definitely not set up for success. So typical kind of anti-pattern production support teams, development teams, operating in silos, no feedback loop from production support back into the dev backlogs. But when you're optimizing for cost, outsourcing actually is a pretty good model, and that tended to work for us at the time. So then we had I would say, discovery that retail was being disrupted, which right now I say those words and it's like, duh. But at the time, and it was 2011, we were watching some of the retail companies that were not being successful and realized that we needed to disrupt ourselves. And so we shifted away from optimizing for cost to optimizing for speed, which was a huge change for us. At the time, our digital experiences, our website, we were releasing twice a year and had basically a steady state investment in the website, and we had outsourced our apps. So those were all being delivered by an agency. So we decided to bring that all in-house, and we 30x'd the investment in those platforms. So it was a huge injection of funding into the environment. We also, so here you'll see that I have agile in quotes, because we basically said, oh, well now we have to stop being a waterfall shop, we need to move to agile. And we did what I think a lot of organizations do. We Googled scaled agile and got SAFe back, and decided that we were gonna implement SAFe in the organization. But the thing that we did that I would, I guess a learning that I've taken forward is we put a bunch of leaders in a room and we modified SAFe to make it work for us. And then we unveiled it to the organization. We were prescribing basically how we were gonna deliver. And didn't have a lot of success with that because teams in the true kind of spirit of agile needed to be self-organizing and needed to come up with their own methodology, and we were being very prescriptive. So we tried that for a while and then kind of backed off of that, and I'll explain that in a little bit. The other thing that I learned at that time is that we really should have applied the strangler pattern. So we had a bunch of existing capabilities that were powering our digital experiences, and we had a choice to make. We could start over or build on top or acquire more technologies, but essentially we decided to build on top of what we already had, and that did not really scale for us, and we ended up having to do some things over later. We also did not shift to an outcome-based approach, which was a learning that, again, I took forward, that it's so important to ground the work in outcomes. And we threw people at everything. So we went on this major hiring spree and just basically just hired as many people as we could. And also took existing roles, retitled them, sent them to like a 2-hour training, and expected to get great outcomes. And it just did not work that way. Like you can't, or if you're going to take traditional roles in your environment, and so for an example, business analyst, I want you now to be a product owner or a product manager. There's so much learning that is needed to be successful, and it's super important to invest in the teams and the people. So that was a learning. So then we went all in. So basically took one of our teams, and it turned out to be what we called our customer mobile team. So I mentioned that we brought the mobile apps back into the environment. Then we decided we still weren't moving fast enough. And at the time, there was a leader in our organization, super strong engineering leader, also super strong lean leader. And he was put into the role to basically lead that team. And without taking the team through a value stream mapping exercise, he just asked a bunch of questions and essentially created the value stream for the team and elevated all of the constraints that were currently happening in our mobile app space. So our cycle time, and it was terrible, but we were releasing twice a year. So basically that created a burning platform to then go after all of these things that I have in orange. So stop funding projects. Let's really fund the teams. Let's, get to a model where we're putting the teams first and we're not having to worry about getting an annual funding plan. We moved to build. So rather than acquiring technologies, we decided we were going to invest in building the capabilities within the team. I mentioned the value stream map. Took a lot of silos out. So I mentioned before that we had like production support teams and dev teams. We also had a QA team. We had infrastructure. We brought them all together and really broke down the silos and said, we're going to have a team that is focused on outcomes. So we also shifted over to outcomes. So rather than coming in and being the iPhone app team, people came in every day and they were the 5-star app store rating team. And their focus every day was to take us from a 2-star app to a 5-star app. And so the teams got really excited about owning outcomes. We also elevated a lot of data, which was not happening in the organization at the time. So examples included things like our crash rate. We actually started making that transparent and visible, and our product management organization really appreciated that. It actually built trust because we were making those that data visible, and then we could prioritize work to make it better. We also looked at things like how many engineers do we have on the team versus product owners? How many program managers are we leveraging to run this effort? And that helped too, to make sure that we were right-sizing the teams and the roles. And we used, I already said the value stream mapping, but that was huge. Like we moved into a space where we were value stream mapping and using A3 problem solving, so we weren't jumping to conclusions about where the bottlenecks were. So right around the same time, I would say we're about 18 months into the journey, I started to get exposure to the DevOps community. So I started in infrastructure at Nordstrom, and I still stayed pretty anchored to the infrastructure team because I just had a lot of passion and empathy for being in infrastructure roles. And at the time, they were kind of leading the way independently of the customer mobile team around infrastructure as code and really driving self-service infrastructure capabilities. And one of the leaders in that organization actually introduced me to John Allspaw at the time, and I was able to talk to him and learn about how I might scale what we were trying to do in the customer mobile space throughout the organization. So this was also a very interesting point in our journey because we had chosen the mobile app team to experiment, there were a lot of skeptics in the organization around taking this broader, because they basically were like, well, you used the unicorn inside the enterprise. And we're like, no, we did so much heavy lifting to get to a good place, but there was still a lot of skepticism of if we could apply these techniques to other parts of the organization. But we did. And we also very intentionally picked pilot teams that were in a variety of situations. So one of the teams that we actually did the value stream map with was a mainframe application. We had a lot of people say it would never work. And I won't go deep on that story. There's actually a talk on YouTube where I talk about it. But the assumption from leadership was get off the mainframe. Like, you got to just move off the mainframe. And what we actually discovered was that was not where the problem was at all. The problem was actually in data that we were requesting from our business team that they did not have. And so they would do this back and forth handoff for sometimes weeks before they could actually deliver value. And it turned out to be a simple fix to actually make it better. So learned a ton. The other thing we learned, we needed the external help. So I mentioned John Allspaw. I also at the time leaned on Gene Kim. I brought him in to talk to our leaders. Handed out the Phoenix Project, did all the things that I'm sure a lot of you have done. And also learned that you need senior leadership engagement. The grassroots will take you so far, but you really need senior leaders to be engaged and in actions, not just words. And so that was a big discovery for me as well, that you really need senior leaders to show up. One thing that I've learned over time, so 3 pretty big organizations all going through transformation, and everybody's different. So one thing that I think happens a lot is like people expect that there's like a DevOps checklist that you can just distribute to the community and everybody can just check the boxes and we'll all be DevOpsing. It's really not the case. I mean, every organization is different, but I will say one anchor that I leverage in every situation that I've been in is value stream mapping. Because I truly believe that until you know the flow of value through the system, it makes it really hard to apply the right capabilities in your environment. So most of you are probably like doing CI/CD or, automation of some sort. That's not always the answer or the first place to start. And almost always it's starting with people, which is the other reason why I'm so passionate about lean, because at the core of lean, it's about respect for people. And how do you create, or how do you minimize burden for the team? And that's another advantage of value stream mapping, because you will see it. It is super obvious where the problems are. And then the teams see it, which is also exciting, and you get that opportunity to go focus on the things that matter. And all the work needs to be visible. This is another thing that I'm super passionate about, including leaders' work. Like, we need to make our work visible, because what I often find is we're a bottleneck, because the team should be autonomous and they should be empowered to make their decisions locally, but sometimes they need help. And speed of decision-making is super important in environments, and often leaders are, they're a bottleneck. I know I have been. And so I'm gonna share some things that we're doing to try to at least quantify the bottleneck in the system for decision-making. So here's where I'm at today. So I'm also a big fan of First 90 Days. I think it's a great framework to leverage. Even like in this case, I'm at Nike, but I've taken another role. And so I'm leveraging the First 90 Days just to learn and listen and figure out kind of where we need to focus as a team. One other thing that I've kind of learned is it's so important to be a teacher as a leader. I'm very extroverted and I can talk a lot, and I'll talk about all of these concepts quite a bit. But it doesn't land unless you're really teaching it. And so I've been trying to figure out the best way to kind of show up as a teacher instead of just showing up and talking about the concepts. And one way I feel like teaching is leading by example. So if I'm asking my team to break things down into smaller, increments, or make their work visible, or be transparent, or leverage data in decision making, I should also be doing that as a leader. So again, lean. I continue to be super focused on this, and I truly believe that that is the evolution that a lot of leaders need to go through, is figuring out how to lead in a lean way. I'll share one story because I believe in going to the work. So I spend a lot of time sitting with my teams and learning and listening. And I had another leader in my journey say, well, that's micromanaging. Like, you're going out and you're telling your team what to do. And I said, and if you're familiar with the word Gemba, Gemba means go and see, not go and tell. I'm not showing up to tell them what to do. I'm showing up to learn. I really want to be curious, and I also want the team to feel safe telling me what they need. And if I'm engaged with the work, then hopefully I'm creating an environment where they feel comfortable telling me the help that they need. So this is a visual of a value stream map that we did and an A3. And the individual in this picture is super passionate about being the owner of the value stream map. And this is one of the walkthroughs that we were doing, where he was sharing what experiments they were going to try with their value stream to reduce their cycle time. So, also super passionate about OKRs, and I am new to this space and I am learning as I go, but we are committed to leveraging OKRs within my team, and we're actually looking at doing it across technology. But essentially, how do we set some outcomes for the teams and cascade it all the way in so we get feedback from the teams? Because if the work they're doing doesn't actually move the needle on the OKR, then we either have the wrong OKR or we're not prioritizing the right work. So I feel like it's a good mechanism to kind of bring teams together and then share. So I'm highly dependent on a lot of different teams in our organization. So how could we share OKRs to make sure we're staying aligned on the work we're doing? And then that's a screenshot of the Jira board that we're using with my leadership team. So we do a daily stand-up, and we're trying to make our work visible so that we're practicing what we're asking our teams to do. And the one thing that we're trying really hard to do is the only thing that should be in progress is what you're doing that day. So really trying to break the work down into something meaningful and actionable. So it's a journey. And then here's how we're leveraging data. So I mentioned being capacity-based. So we have all the work visible so that we can see which teams are over capacity or under capacity. Do we need to make prioritization adjustments based on the work? Because often what we find is there's a lot of invisible work in our jobs. And sometimes it can be hard to manage expectations, especially with product management, if they're super focused on prioritizing features. And we know that our teams do more than that. We work on compliance activities. We work on reducing technical debt. We work on things that are actually features of the product, but they're not always talked about that way. So this is a great way for us to make it visible. We're also using the data that's part of State of DevOps report and Accelerate. So you see there's a screenshot of employee net promoter score. So we track that and use it to understand teams and where they need help. And so if we have a team with a low ENPS, I'll go and visit and try to find out why they're feeling that way. So learn a ton through that. And we celebrate. So this is a photo of, we give out an Orange Box award every month. So if you buy Nikes, you probably get an orange box. So we reuse those and we stuff it full of random things that are orange. So like Cheetos and Fanta. And I always joke when I take it to the teams, I'm like, there's a puppy in there. But there's not a puppy in there. It's always, it's typically like just random orange stuff. And we ground it in, and I'll show on the next slide, we have maxims at Nike, and this one, they won for creating the future of sport. These are the other maxims. So these are leadership commitments that I make to my team and to the broader organization. I've been building these throughout my career, and I'm trying to kind of map them into the maxims to see if they can show up that way, but I'll just touch on a couple. So I believe in creating a dynamic learning organization. I think it's super important. I think that one thing I did not say earlier, but vocabulary matters. And one thing that I think is important, we talk about failing fast, and I'm sure that gets mentioned in a lot of organizations. I actually shifted it to learn fast. Because what I found is failure often just like gives people this anxiety, and it's not necessary. And if it's really, in most cases, it is about learning, which is also tightly connected to under do the right thing, that first line, honoring and extracting reality. So I used to say honor reality. I always want to honor reality. I also always want reality. I don't want to walk around without the knowledge of what's really happening with my teams. I added extract because I often found, especially if you're in senior leadership, the whole dynamic of the conversation changes when you show up. And I don't want people to be scared of me. I'm mostly smiley, but I still find that I show up and like people just aren't really saying what I think they want to say. And so I've been trying really hard to turn that around and ask a lot of questions. I never ask who, by the way, like if we have an issue, who is not what I ask. It's always about what in the system broke down or how can I help? Is there something I can do to actually contribute and help? And so this is something that probably is the biggest focus for me is how do I create that environment for my team and hopefully for even the broader organization. So key takeaways, and I said this earlier, every organization is different. Frankly, every team is different because one thing that I've found is people often want to say like, let's aggregate cycle time and let's compare teams to each other. And it's like, no, that is not the value of the data. The data is valuable to the team, and you need the context in order to actually leverage the data, and you can't just pick one metric. You've got to have a combination of metrics so that you can see the holistic picture. But every organization is different, every team is different, and again, the only thing that I would stand behind is the value of value stream mapping regardless of the situation. I talked about lean and continuous learning are critical, and I truly believe leaders have to evolve. I think the traditional management style of command and control is just, it does not work in situations where you're trying to transform your organization. And so having that leadership evolution is super important. Here are some resources that I've used throughout my journey, and so I keep adding to this over time. I mentioned the State of DevOps report and Accelerate. Those documents that are kind of in the center, those are part of what's called the DevOps Enterprise Forum. They're free. They are amazing resources. Like you can download them. There are things from like how to lead change to how to work with your security and audit department when you're moving to a DevOps model. There's just a ton of amazing material that you can leverage. And then just some additional links to, I talked about OKRs. And then if you want to learn more about kind of my philosophies on leadership, I also did a course for UC Davis on Coursera where I go deeper into some of these concepts. And then you can also, if you want, search YouTube. There's a lot of DevOps Enterprise Summit talks. Tons of great talks from other retailers, financial services, like tons of industries that are going through this. And one thing that I also believe about this community is that it's about sharing and learning from each other. I've learned so much from this community and just highly recommend like checking out any of that content. And obviously all the Devopsdays videos too are amazing. That's all. And I don't know if I stayed on time. Was I on time?
You've got a couple of minutes. Does anybody have any? Do you want to take questions?
I can take questions,
Does
sure.
anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Yeah.
So being in retail, NPS is a big market there. I'd never heard of an eNPS. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little about that, how you capture that? And then
Absolutely.
you spoke about what you do with it, but just how you capture it.
Yeah. So very similar to how NPS is captured. So we asked 2 questions. I actually leverage the questions that are in the Accelerate book. So we ask, how likely are you to refer a friend or colleague to your team? And then how likely are you to refer a friend or colleague to the technology organization? And then, literally it's the scale of -100 to 100. And we try to get up. I think the guidance is like 30 and higher is considered good. And so when we look at that, so I have monthly reviews, even though we ask it quarterly, because there's so many teams taking the survey that it's hard to visit all of them. And so we take one a month that's a high score and a low score, and then we go seek to understand. Regardless of, even if it was, I would refer them to my team, but not to technology, I still want to go find out. But that's how we get the data. Yeah.
So I have a question about, you mentioned in 2011 at Nordstrom, you started that process and had some false starts and things didn't go perfectly well at the start. How long did that entire process to transform actually take from when you decided in 2011 to when you really felt like, hey, we're doing it?
That's a really great question. So the customer mobile team got there in about 2 years. The rest of the organization, it was closer to 4. And that still was only being practiced in a subset of the organization. We had not taken it broader. And some of the reasons for that, which this probably won't be surprising, some teams weren't ready. And it was so important to make sure that the leaders were ready before we took the concepts to a team, because we found through experimentation that the teams that sustained it, one of the keys to success was leadership engagement. And so there were still pockets of the organization going through that journey when I left. Yeah. Good?
Awesome. We're
Okay,
good. Thank you very
thanks.
much, Courtney.
Thank you.
Okay, quick reminder, everyone. We've got a lot of people that are waiting and looking to find some seats. So if I can ask everyone to do me a favor and kind of scram into the center to leave the aisle seats open, or at least a few of them, so people as they're coming in can still find a place without having to bump around people. Okay, next up we have Jeremy Hayes talking about creating a culture of inclusion.
Anything coming up yet? Oh, great. Okay.
It takes a second to get everything to refresh.
Okay.
Are you up on the display? Let's try a different, yeah, try unplugging it and plugging it back in. See if your laptop's showing the external display. Oh, you're on Wi-Fi stuff, okay. Okay, it looks like it just.
Great, thank you. Just trying to. I have no idea where my mouse is. All right, everybody, good morning. So, good morning, everybody. Can you guys do me a favor? This is the first time I've done one of these, and my mom is watching. Would you guys take a selfie with me? Just, I have to, yeah, I have to do this. Thanks. So my name is Jeremy Hayes. I am a DevOps engineer with Liatrio. Very excited to be here in Columbus. So I live in Boston, but I'm actually from Iowa, you know, the other state with 3 vowels and a consonant. So we don't do that OH, I don't know. But so it just feels a little bit like coming home to me. So if you want to know more about Liatrio, check out our booth. But that's not why I'm up here today. Today, I want to talk to you about creating a culture of inclusion. And doesn't that just sound really nice, like world peace or free donuts? And there are lots of reasons that this is important to me personally. In my past lives, I've been a queer activist, a social justice educator, an out gay man, and somebody who really just cares about people. But then I became a father. And now these 2 little darlings drive everything that I do, and they have me thinking a lot about what I can be doing to make the world a better and safer place for them. Because let's face it, we live in a world where people are treated differently because of who they are and how they look. People like to say that we live in a colorblind society or that we've moved beyond seeing race, but often the people who are saying that aren't the people who experience racism every day. And we've all seen headlines about the diversity problem in tech. A lot of us in the room have probably felt it ourselves. And whether that's because you've personally experienced discrimination or just feeling left out, or you've looked around your organization and noticed, wow, everybody here looks just like me. Or conversely, nobody here looks like me. According to research from Glassdoor, 67% of job seekers consider the workplace diversity when they're looking at job opportunities. And more than 50% of employees want their workplace to do more to increase diversity. But what we know is that just getting more people with different characteristics into the room isn't enough. It's a start, don't get me wrong, but we need to take a hard look at the culture and what we're doing or not doing to be truly inclusive. When I talk about a culture of inclusion, I mean a place where organizational customs, beliefs, and actions truly honor and welcome all individuals, where factors like race, gender, sexual orientation gender identity, disability status, mental health, religion, ethnic and cultural background, socioeconomic status, all these things don't prevent someone from being fully involved. A place where people are not just invited in, but are truly made a part of the organization. So today, I want to suggest to you some things that you can do to help create that culture in your own organizations. First of all, just be yourself. You are valuable. You bring a unique set of talents and perspectives to your organization, and you should feel comfortable bringing all those aspects of your identity to work with you. When we are all our whole, authentic selves, we make it easier for others to do the same. And if we're going to truly value difference, we have to make it visible. When our culture is truly inclusive, the parts of our identity that make us unique become common and ordinary rather than strange or exotic. For example, I talk about my husband in casual conversation just as much as my coworkers talk about their opposite-sex partners. It should be completely normal to ask for an adjusted work schedule during Ramadan when you're fasting. I attended HashiConf earlier this month, and I heard a HashiCorp engineer there talk about how he unintentionally triggered a movement within the organization that led to the creation of pride stickers and other swag just because he asked for it. He wanted to be visible as a queer person in tech, and by doing so, he created a space that made it easier for others to do the same. It's not always easy, especially if you feel like you're the only person like you. But sometimes I think you'll be surprised what you'll find when you ask. And if you work at an organization that doesn't respect you for who you are, try to find the allies in the organization who can help you bring about the change. And if that doesn't work, maybe it's time to look for a different place. Now, for some of us, that's easier said than done. I know that I'm speaking from a place of privilege as a cis white male, pretty established in my career, and not everyone can take those kinds of risks. The second thing you can do is be mindful of the words you use every day. Like Courtney said when she was talking about her maxims, vocabulary matters. And I'm not talking about political correctness. I'm talking about being aware of the language that you use and how it might impact other people. For starters, try using gender-neutral terms. I have a coworker from California who calls everybody dude or bro. Every sentence either starts with dude or ends with bro. And he's trying really hard to change, but like any other habit, it's hard to break. Or take my husband as an example. His father, and I'm sure many other fathers, taught him that the polite way to address a group of women is to say ladies. But that can be perceived as diminutive or condescending, and you also don't know if everyone in the group actually identifies as a lady. There are lots of alternatives, and it takes practice. I encourage you to try it out this week, but you have to give yourself permission to make mistakes, because that's what matters, the trying. That's what signals, hey, I get it, and I'm working on being inclusive. It's not about being perfect and getting it right all the time. And it's okay to stop and correct yourself mid-sentence. Even that opens up the opportunity for further dialogue. And I can't talk about gender-inclusive language without mentioning pronouns. With singer Sam Smith recently announcing their pronouns, it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment. Sometimes when you go to conferences, you'll notice people with their pronouns on their badges. And it's a way to, we need to respect people and how they choose to identify. And it's another opportunity to make things more visible. I've started including my pronouns in my email signature, on my Twitter bio. When everyone is explicit about their pronouns, including people whose gender isn't really called into question, it actually makes it more comfortable for someone who identifies as non-binary or someone whose presentation might not match their pronouns to self-identify and ask to be called what they want. The third thing you can do is get to know people as individuals and treat them as such. You are a complete, complex person with a multifaceted identity, and so are all your coworkers. So try not to rely on stereotypes that are based on someone's appearance or background and let those determine how you interact with them. At the end of the day, we are all individuals with our own unique blend of nature and nurture that governs how our personalities manifest. When we start treating some people differently or excluding them, we miss out on the value that they bring to the organization. A good friend of mine, Vernon Wall, who is a diversity trainer, talks about the tape recorder that plays in our head. Now, for you youngins in the room, think of a Spotify playlist. These are all the messages that we picked up as we were growing up, whether it's from our families or school, church, wherever. These are all the things that you noticed, even subconsciously. Maybe it was observing how people were being treated differently based on how they looked or where they were from, or even explicit messages like being told that a particular group is lazy or women belong in the kitchen. All those messages were recorded on the track in your head, and now it's just constantly playing in the background. So when you see someone who looks a certain way walking down the street, without even thinking about it, you draw on those messages and make assumptions about that person. That's unconscious bias. It's hard to undo that programming because it's often rooted in fears or superstitions or ignorance. And usually the people we got it from are the people that we grew up trusting and believing more than anybody else. My husband likes to talk about the messages he got from his mother, where she contends that anybody who doesn't like animals is evil and you can't trust men who wear pinky rings. These are silly, right? They're not true things, but the unconscious bias is still there on some level. You can undo this. It requires a lot of self-awareness. It can be helpful to ask your colleagues or friends what they think your biases are. Having open and honest conversations about the biases that other people see in us can help to reveal our blind spots. And you can work on this over the next couple days too. Try to notice when you make an assumption about somebody that you don't know and think about, where is that coming from? What are the messages that are playing in your head? According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, about 1 in 5 adults in the US experience mental illness in a given year. Some mental illnesses are more debilitating than others, but the reality is that most of us will be impacted by our mental health in some way. This can include illnesses like depression or anxiety, and also neurodevelopmental disorders like learning disorders or autism. The fourth thing you can do is practice empathy and compassion for your coworkers who might be struggling with these issues. For most of us, our jobs are stressful, but it's usually a positive kind of stress that challenges us to improve and get better at our work. We need to understand that we all come to work with different experiences and needs. For me, standing up here and doing public speaking is stressful. I mean, just check my heart rate monitor. But for someone with anxiety, it can be really hard and almost impossible. James Meikle did a great presentation about this at Devopsdays in Boston last year, and there's a link to the recording of that in the slides here. The open sourcing mental illness is a great resource as well. They've got a lot of videos and resources on their website that you can check out about mental health and tech. Talking openly about mental health can help to reduce the stigma around it and contribute to a more inclusive culture. I tell pretty much anybody who will listen that between my husband and me, we see 2 individual therapists and a couples therapist every month. The CEO of my company talks openly about he and his wife's therapy and likens it to getting an oil change. Be sure to take the time for self-care. We all know that burnout is a real thing. If your company allows for mental health days or offers unlimited PTO, take advantage of those days when you need it, and be as open as you feel comfortable with your supervisor about your needs. Fifth, pay attention to the people in your organization whose voices and perspectives are marginalized. It's likely not even intentional. How many times are you sitting in a meeting and a woman presents an idea, 2 minutes later, a male colleague says basically the same thing, right? Those of us with privilege have a responsibility to take notice of that and do something about it. So the next time that female colleague presents something, chime in with, hey, that sounds really interesting, tell us more. We can't expect someone who is being marginalized to always be able to advocate for themselves. So check in with your colleagues and see how they're doing, what they're feeling. It's important to have a working environment that is accessible to individuals with physical disabilities, but creating a welcoming space goes beyond just that. Instead of thinking about just accommodations, look at inclusive design, which focuses on making environments universally accessible and looks beyond disability. Think about what someone with different needs from you might need and make that the norm rather than the exception that they have to request. That not only helps the person who might need that accommodation, but it is also a clear signal of inclusion. Make slide decks and websites that are easy to read for people with low vision. Provide trainings in a variety of modes for people with different learning styles. Encourage your company to have lactation rooms, nap rooms, prayer or meditation rooms to make your space more welcoming for everybody. The goal is to make sure that everyone is able to fully participate. If you're involved in the hiring process in your organization, take a critical look at your processes. How diverse is your candidate pool? How could you be actively recruiting candidates who have traditionally been underrepresented? Remember that unconscious bias, that Spotify playlist playing in your head? Be really mindful about that in your interview process. For example, there's research that indicates that those with ethnic-sounding names in Western countries are less likely to even be selected for an interview just on the basis of their name on their resume than those with Western names. Notice when you're evaluating candidates differently based on their identity. If you see a female candidate and a male candidate exhibit the same behavior, do you treat them differently? Make sure that your evaluation criteria are objective, and consider having anti-bias training for your recruiting teams and hiring managers. Often at conferences like this, we have codes of conduct, like they showed earlier, that call out what behavior is acceptable and what isn't. Encourage your organization to have one too, and to make it public. People who are likely to experience harassment or have experienced it before are more likely to join your organization if they feel it's going to be a safe place for them where harassment won't be tolerated. The 2018 Women in the Workplace report found that only 27% of employees say that managers regularly challenge biased language and behavior when they observe it. Only 40% say that disrespectful behavior toward women is called out. And just 32% think their company swiftly acts on claims of sexual harassment. But it's not just sexual harassment we need to be aware of. Don't tolerate jokes about mental disorders or biased language about women or racial groups or LGBT people. When you see behavior that's inappropriate or disrespectful, speak up. Change won't come if we're all silent. Finally, take the time to learn about the experiences of people who are different from you. Look for books, podcasts, blog posts from a variety of perspectives. The uploaded slides for this presentation have links to some suggested resources that you can check out as a starting point. So, thanks for being here today. I hope you took away something that can help you and your organization be more inclusive. Check out this link to give me your feedback. If you don't get the Pearl Jam reference, I can't help you. I'll be hanging out at the Leatrio booth this afternoon, so come by if you want to chat some more about this. Thanks a lot and enjoy the rest of the conference.
All right. Sorry, I'm a little bit late here, so don't go up there. Okay. Can I get F5 and Sysdig? So, missed it from before. Can you guys hear me okay? So I missed it from before. We have our thank yous from our sponsors have a quick minute with you guys. So, can you hear me at all? No? Don't do that either. Okay, sorry. So we have F5 and Sysdig coming up, and yeah, go for it, man.
Hey everyone, this is Ji Chow. I'm a DevOps SE from F5/Nginx. So I want to thank you all for coming, and we're happy to be here. So F5, what we do is we make applications secure and faster. What we do is all our products are fits into the CI/CD pipeline. And in particular, Nginx is the most widely deployed web server out there. And what we've done is we've had API capabilities as well as a application server called Unit. So we're a huge supporter of open source, and come to our table and come speak to us if you guys use Nginx or thinking of using it. And yeah, thank you. All right, Sistig. Who's up next?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us today. Over at Sistig, we are a cloud-native visibility and security platform utilizing system calls as our source of data, built by the creator of Wireshark. If you guys would like to know some more information, we'd be happy to give you a demo at our booth, which is right outside of that door. Thanks.
Can't leave. We're just coming on stage. So I'm going to leave anyway. Hi, good morning. I'm Deanna Springs, and
I'm Megan Murray.
we're with Cover My Meds. A lot of people are not quite as familiar with what we do and who we are. So to kind of give you a little information, Megan's been there way longer than I have, so I'll let her explain kind of the company and what we do.
Yeah, so we basically build the software necessary to facilitate the prior authorization process and sort of automate that, which ultimately makes it a lot easier for patients to get their medications quicker than they would have otherwise. So a lot of exciting stuff when it comes to reducing prescription abandonment and just helping patients be healthy. So.
Great. We're both with Talent Acquisition, and part of our purpose for being here today is really just kind of give people a little more information about who we do. Sometimes we get confused with actual medication and medical devices, and so we just want to let you know that we are an IT software company and health that deals primarily in healthcare, specifically medication, and we are hiring, if we're allowed to say that here. I'm going to say that here. So definitely, look us up. I think you'll enjoy not only what we do, find that we're basically a mission-driven company, but I think you'll also enjoy the culture.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
I'm Troy Stevens. I am with Morpheus, and this is.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Hoyt. I'm also with Morpheus.
Awesome. All right. So Morpheus is a 100% agnostic automation and orchestration provisioning tool. So we don't really care whether you're provisioning into the public cloud, private cloud, if you're provisioning into Kubernetes, bare metal. We really abstract the thing that you're trying to provision and allow you that flexibility to tie in the existing tool sets you guys are using. We've built all of the native integrations. We've got 20 clouds that we've already built native API integrations into, as well as about 75, 80 enterprise tool sets that you might use. So we kind of make it that easy button for self-provisioning, or for automation and self-provisioning.
Yeah, and for the ops team, what we really provide is the ability to take any cloud, both private and public, to really tie them into a way that we're going to seamlessly deploy our services. For development team, we can take any cloud, any integration point that we have, and really tie it into that CI/CD pipeline that most of us are looking for. Really exciting news with 4.0, which actually dropped about a month and a half ago. We are a CNCF certified distribution of Kubernetes. That really gives you some choice and freedom to really how we deploy Kubernetes. Also, with our jobs engine, we can be a possible replacement for Ansible Tower, and our operational workflow engine that just came out is something that a lot of our clients are looking forward to. Thanks for the time, guys.
Okay, so we're going to get things kind of back on track. We're on break until about 10:30 when we've got our next presenter up. So we'll see you guys in a few minutes. Thanks.
smallest thing that could possibly work and iterated on it over time. So at the beginning, the operations team was responsible for deploying the application. We had a script we would run, and we would deploy the app. We quickly realized that the QA team, it was inefficient for them to keep asking the ops team to deploy a version of software into their instances. So we enhanced the script, and we put it into a CI tool. So there was a web interface where the QA team could go in, they could pick the version of the software they wanted, and they could click the environment from a drop-down and hit a button, and the software would go into the environment for them, so they could self-service. And we leveraged that process also to start releasing into production. So we had a web page you could go to, you could pick your version, your customer, and environment, and we could push the software out to production. So the operations team started doing that as well. So we were not able to deliver the software during business hours early on, so at 9 p.m. we would get on a conference call, we would deliver the software, and the ops team and the app team paired on that work. So at 9 p.m. on a deploy night, a member from the ops team, a member from the applications team would get together at 9 p.m. and do the deploy, right? And so as we got better over time, then the ops team sort of stepped back a little bit, and so we were just kind of on standby. So on a deploy night, the application team member doing the deploy would connect to the server and do the deploy, and the ops person was just kind of watching Slack to see if anything came up, but wasn't really participating on the meeting. So as you can imagine, as we went through this process, right, we started getting better at delivering our software, and we had more releases to deliver to the user. And so if you're doing a deploy at 9 p.m., once a month, that's probably not so bad, especially if it rotates. But if you start doing that once a week or multiple times a week, that starts to get old real fast. So because the application team was involved in the deploys, and they were feeling the pain of having to get on their laptop at 9 o'clock at home and do the deploy, this sparked a lot of conversations, right? Like, what can we do to make this better? What places in the application are preventing us from deploying during the day? And so there was two main areas of the application. There was a scanning page and a form filling page that kind of maintained a lot of client-side state, and if the page refreshed, the users would lose the data. So the app team took on enhancing those pages to kind of store that data on the website as the user left the field or as each page came in, so we didn't have to worry about any kind of data loss during an upgrade scenario. And then the ops team worked on implementing a blue-green deploy pattern. And after several months of work by both teams, we ended up in a state where we were able to deploy the application during the day. So then, hey, this is great. We can deploy 2 times a week. We can do it at lunchtime, or we can do it in the morning. If we have a bug fix available, we can just put it out right away. We don't have to wait till the evening. So the next kind of thing I'd like to talk about is collaboration. And this to me is kind of the heart of DevOps. If you kind of look at the word like development and ops smushed together, what does that mean? A lot of people are trying different methods, to do the ops people learn how to code, do the developers learn infrastructure, do we collapse the team together? What does that actually mean? So at Northwoods, what we did was we just started with 2 ops people building infrastructure, and then the application team was building the application. But because we didn't have any silos to start with, like I mentioned, this the advantages we had with the greenfield application, we chose not to build any silos. So the app team and my coworker and I were co-located together in the same workspace. My coworker and I attended all the application team sprint activities. So we went to their stand-ups, we went to their sprint plannings and their retrospectives. And we ended up with this culture of joint responsibility for the application. And I really think what led to that was sharing the work and sharing the knowledge. So because we were working closely together on the application, we were in the same meetings, hearing the same things. As I mentioned, we had many 9 o'clock deploy sessions together. There was a great amount of trust that built up between the teams. And we ended up with this place where everyone really cared deeply about the application, about making it better. There was no us versus them because we didn't let it start that way. We were kind of unified in our goal of figuring out how best to deliver this application. So when the application team needed to build stuff to make that better, they did. When the ops team needed to fix stuff, we did. And we've had a lot of success by making the two teams kind of very highly integrated. The ops team of now 3 people is dedicated to that Traverse team. We're not serving multiple applications. So it's allowed us to be very focused and to be excellent collaborative partners. The next thing I'd like to talk about is planning. So if you think about the flow of software out to the end user, you often think about this workflow that kind of starts with plan and design, and then maybe build and test and deploy and monitor and operate. So I really didn't want the operations team to be in a place where they're just passively receiving new versions that came from the application team. If you have an application that a new feature gets developed with some kind of an architectural flaw and it gets out into production, that's really expensive to remediate. So it's really awesome if the ops team can be partners with the app team at the design phase. So because we were embedded in their meetings, our ears would perk up when we heard during sprint planning, we're going to add this new feature that's going to ingest a ton of data, or the mobile app is going to start syncing back photos that are captured in the field. Okay, now alarm bells are going off in my head. What do we need? What kind of capacity do we need on the server side to resize those images, to store them, and properly handle things? So this kind of closely working together, but not just at deploy time, right? So the planning is kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. I really wanted to be a resource and a partner for the application team. So when we're designing a new feature, maybe we could suggest an AWS service that might fit in, or those kind of things that will help the application be easier to operate once it actually gets out into production. So the second way is about feedback loops. So I'm going to skip past that cheesy slide, and then we'll talk about operational insight. So I kind of told this story at the very beginning when I talked about the progress we've made about getting feedback from the application back upstream, right? So when we started with Traverse, we wanted to know when exceptions happen. So we did what most teams do. We bought an exception handling tool, and we integrated it into the application. So now if there's exceptions in JavaScript on the front end or in the Rails back end, they go to a website. We can log in, see what exceptions are happening, how many are happening of each type, and who's being affected, and so forth. And over time, there was, as is kind of natural in teams, there was a big focus on feature work and, making sure that we kept, operational attributes of the app in mind, kind of slipped from focus for a time, and there was a large amount of errors happening. And this was kind of visible to the ops team and kind of frustrating for us because we saw, exceptions happening all the time. It's hard to support and operate an application when you see lots of errors. Is that normal? Is that bad? What's actually going on out there? It's hard to know. So this error reporting software was hooked up to a Slack channel, but it really wasn't kind of registering on people's radars. So and the software had an interesting feature that would put a message in the Slack channel the first time an error happened, the 10th time, 100th time, 1000th time, which is really good if you don't want to get a lot of notifications. But it can have the side effect of hiding errors. So for example, if the 100th error just happened, you won't see another notification for 900 more errors. And it's also kind of viscerally different in the channel to see, 100 errors of this type occurred, one message, than to see 100 errors come into the channel. So we actually went in and we turned that feature off and said, just send every exception to the channel. And then we separated prod and non-prod into different channels. It was the most amazing thing that happened because conversations changed that afternoon. Like, it was immediately clear the volume of errors that were happening. There was no longer any doubt that they might be being generated by QA activities. And immediately developers were talking about what can we do to reduce this number of exceptions that we're seeing? Is this affecting user behavior? Maybe we should get out there and sit with some users and see if this flood of things we're seeing is actually, kind of hurting the way they use the application. And out of that came a process where there was a 10% amount of cards in the sprint allocated toward triaging and fixing the most common occurring exceptions. And we kept that process until we reduced the number of exceptions down to a normal level. So to me, that's a great story about what happens when you take, things that are happening with your application in production, with your infrastructure, and expose that feedback back upstream. So on-call. Right now, our application team is the first on-call when incidents happen. Of course, things did not start this way. Early on, it was the ops team who got paged when things went south. And the ops team would go and try to fix it. Of course, the ops team doesn't understand the application as well as a developer. And so we quickly sometimes needed to pull in developers when an incident happened. And as I mentioned, we've been building this culture of shared ownership and responsibility for this application, working very closely together. And it was very common for an application developer and an ops person to pair together on remediating incidents. And then over time, we realized, we really just need to make the application team first on call for the application. It maps directly back. I can't think of a stronger feedback signal of what's actually happening out in production than getting a page, right? So if you're the app team, that's great feedback about what you're building. So, but the ops team did not vanish off into the sunset, right, when we handed over the pager. The ops team stayed as the second level escalation. So if an application developer can't get to the page, it'll escalate to ops, or if they are investigating an issue and if they want help, they just hit a button to escalate, and then we're right back in there pairing with them, resolving the issue. So, yeah. Okay, so the third way is about learning, experimentation, and improvement. So I've kind of hit on this several times throughout this, but a huge key to our success was tight integration between operations and developers. That's the heart of DevOps, mutual respect, joint responsibility. In addition to the regular sprint activities that we participate in, the app team and the ops team each has a series of roundups that occur every 2 weeks. And these are meetings where each team is trying to improve their craft. Maybe a developer implemented a new pattern in a Rails controller and they want to show other developers that pattern can spread through the rest of the code base. In an ops roundup, maybe I want to share the latest thing I learned about Ansible, or we want to talk about how we can reduce some technical debt in our code base, what our plan of attack is. And both teams are cross-invited to these meetings, so there's a huge amount of sharing that goes on. And because the ops team is part of the product delivery organization at Northwoods, the operations team is invited to the every 6 monthly roadmap updates to learn what's coming down the pipe or what the teams are going to be building. In our case, the Traverse team that we support. And the ops team has a quarterly infrastructure sharing meeting where we kind of show the architecture diagram and what we've built in the last 3 months, and we kind of solicit feedback from developers about if they have suggestions or ideas, questions. And we also share things like results of the latest DR tests and maybe the results of the latest vulnerability scan, things like that. I kind of touched on this earlier, but there's no better way to learn than to postmortem incidents. So I kind of mentioned at the very beginning of the talk that DevOps was kind of amorphous when it came to like the culture side of things. There's also certain practices that are kind of hard to get a grip on, right? So, I read a lot of blog posts about the just culture and blameless postmortems, and there's a 30-page guide from Etsy. And, as a practitioner who's helping to implement these practices, but also I was a builder, right? So I had cards I had to work every day to get the infrastructure built. Remember, we're a team of 3. We don't have the resources to get in Gene Kim and John Allspot to talk to us. So we didn't really know how to do postmortems, but the simplest thing to do is just to get started, right? So we just put a checklist item on our deploy checklist. If the deploy fails, send out a calendar invite for 30 minutes the next day. We just got in a room together, opened up a wiki page, and tried to type out what happened. And of course, it was a shambles the first time. And as we iterated on it, we got better. People kind of understood what to expect. There's no shame in like, oh, I screwed something up, I need to call a postmortem. So people started doing that. And we kind of got that built into our culture. So then, out of those postmortems, we would take the things we learned, and then folks would go back to their respective teams generate cards that would go into the sprint work to kind of remediate the underlying things that maybe led to the incident. So the last thing I'm going to talk about here is kind of experimentation. So we do this really cool thing called Innovation Day. And Innovation Day is one day every 2 weeks where the application and ops teams don't do any sprint work. Instead, each person pursues a project of their choice. So at the beginning of the day, there's a stand-up, and everyone kind of goes around the room and talks about what they plan to work on that day. And if that gives the opportunity for people to find a pair partner if they're looking for a project or something. And then at the end of the day, we have a demo time where people can show what they learned during that day if they want. And Innovation Day has really been valuable, and a ton of things have come out of it. We've actually had features been built that got into the application, so they were prototyped on Innovation Day. They were recognized as extremely valuable. They got turned into card work and became, official and worked through the normal sprint process. We've also had time to kick the tires on lots of new things and explore viability of different container platforms, and developers have been experimenting with Lambda and kind of learning new tricks and techniques. So it's been a really awesome thing for us. I think that's the last slide. So thanks for letting me share that story with you all. And I guess we have a few minutes, so that's the end.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Charles. Anybody have any questions? Raise your hand. I'll come to you. Anybody? Am I missing you? Oh, killed it, man. Nice job. Michael Ducey, everybody. Never subtle.
This one. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So real quick, just a little, who's Dynatrace? Some people may know, maybe some customers in the audience. So Dynatrace is an agent technology. We provide end-to-end monitoring, so that's all the way from your real user, unless that's an external customer or an internal customer, all the way down to where that data is sitting into the code level. So on top of that, we also take all of that data and understand what's normal. We also understand the correlation and the causation between all those interdependencies. And we're able to say that when a problem takes place, we can potentially point to the root cause of that problem. So the example that I give is, you may have an issue where there's 100% CPU saturation. Well, the first question is, you blame the infrastructure people. You add more hardware. But really what's causing that, and what Dynatrace is able to do is understand there may be a service that's driving that CPU level, and that may be caused by a level of code. And then on top of that, we may say, oh, well, we understand what was taking place in this environment. There was a code deploy that happened 15 minutes ago that was done by whoever, John Smith. So therefore, we'll go hunt down John Smith, get him in a room, and have him fix it. So if you walk away with one thing with Dynatrace, it's answers at your fingertips. So end-to-end monitoring and answers at your fingertips. And I think I'm over a minute, so.
Thanks so much, Dynatrace. Welcoming Damien with Chef.
Hello. Good morning. I think I work for, I work for Chef Software. The thing I want to do first is thank the community for really coming out for these type of events, because I know that there's a lot of learning going on and there's a lot of different stories. And speaking of stories, I think the one thing that I actually like to do is just kind of learn through different people's experiences. So I kind of have like 3 calls to action if you want to come by our table and just rant about things. First one has to deal with like kind of your craziest like security story that's ever happened, whether you deploy something that broke something in production all the way down to maybe some local developer maybe kept like local Git keys in an actual AWS environment, then your AWS environment gets hacked. Or it's just something all the way down to maybe something on your application side. So if you're dealing with application deployment problems, such as trying to 12-factor a 25-year-old application, I know somebody in this room has done that, and let me know how that went or how's that going. And of course, my minute is almost up. So again, I work for Chef Software. Come on over, tell me about some of your stories regarding security and application automation. Thanks again.
Awesome. So next up we have Kristen Biddulph on leading agile transformations. A house divided cannot stand.
Hello. Is everybody with me? Just for Bill. OH. Thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about leading agile transformations and how a house divided cannot stand. We're in this together. My name is Kristen Biddulph, and over the last 6 years, I've been leading software delivery teams across the financial insurance industries. And my current focus is on providing solutions for high-performance teams in their product-centric journeys. So today we're going to go over a little bit of the problem statement of why I contend most companies begin an agile transformation, some of the revelations that they may come up against and the techniques that you can use and leverage during these agile transformations. And then in addition to that, you're almost certainly going to be running into challenges while you're trying to make this change. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those challenges during the transition. So, agile transformations are very complicated endeavors, and especially for large enterprises trying to keep pace in today's fluid digital marketplace. But customers are demanding more, and they want it fast, and companies need to find ways to compress the timelines in order to get those features that customers seek out there in the market to remain competitive. So prior to an agile transformation, your process may look very similar to this, and business and IT may have very similar pain points across this process. There might be a long linear process with a unidirectional information flow, planning being inflexible, tied to very rigid annual funding cycle. Is this starting to resonate with folks? Siloed interactions with multiple handoffs, unclear product ownership, at times non-existent product ownership. Large batches of work delivered over budget due to inaccurate estimation, that one-size-fits-all mentality to how you actually should develop your application, infrequent, slow communication between the teams developing, and also, as a result of that, you're getting this disjointed single-channel project that's providing that varying customer experience as they enter from one channel into another. That is a whole mouthful. But from there, what I would say is that many companies have begun their transformational journeys only to find that their progress is ground to a halt as they encounter some of these challenges. So for change to be sustainable, it can't be done in a vacuum. Defining success for an organization is really important to ensure that both business and IT have a common goal. So one technique that I would contend is very good for creating this shared vision across the two spectrums is commander's intent. Prior to going into IT, I did have I did work for the government, and so this was one of the techniques that I learned from there, and the only one that I really find applicable as you bring it into an agile world from a command and control world. And what this states is that it provides a focus on defining the end state, right? So we're not worried about the path along the way. We're worried about defining the end state and the overall purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. And with this definition of what success looks like in this uncertain, dynamic, resource-constrained environment, we might put a few guardrails on there, but that's really all it is. And so the moment that I came into software delivery, I immediately saw this uncertain, dynamic, and resource-constrained environment, and I thought, wow, this really applies. And if I can define what success means, that's really going to help folks understand where we're going and not have to constantly touch base with me as they're building and moving. They can be enabled to make their own decisions. So a good example of what I would put out there as commander's intent is something like this. Going forward, we need to provide a customer experience in an omni-channel environment, delivering a consistent, seamless, high-quality experience that allows customers to start a journey in one channel and continue through the next while achieving increased delivery velocity. And to achieve that increased delivery velocity, we're going to take a look at transitioning from a project-based delivery model to a product-based delivery model. Integrate the plan and build activity to bring business and IT together. Use these agile and lean practices across the full spectrum of the life cycle. Implement a continuous flow of delivery, break down work into smaller batches, eliminate as many handoffs as you can, and reduce that duplication of work. And all through this, we're going to improve that collaboration and communication by working as one team. Now, we've talked a great deal about kind of the organizational level of defining success for this agile transformation and getting that C-suite buy-in and support of your agile transformation is paramount to that foundational success factor for that agile transformation. But there's another component that I would propose is just as important as that support, and that would be the grassroots adoption from the teams that are actually building those products that you are putting out there for your customers to use. And so one of the items for defining success for those teams and getting started is to provide a response to these questions. What capability is the customer wanting? What is the initially proposed solution? And what benefits realization does offering this capability provide the company? And then, together, the whole cross-functional team led by the product owner can collaboratively elicit the requirements and also have the empowerment to optimize that overall solution and hopefully optimize the benefits realization and the customer satisfaction with that product. Now, meeting the expectations of customers requires companies to have ever shorter product life cycles. Quick incremental delivery is really key to remaining competitive. And one technique to enable incremental delivery is a minimally viable product. Some may have also heard of minimally marketable product and how those two interact together. So today we're going to define minimally viable product as that smallest possible feature set that addresses the user's needs, creates the desired user experience, and can be marketed and sold successfully. So think about it in terms of, as you're figuring out what your capability, feature set, and user stories are, what is that base amount of functionality that you can get out there for the user so that you can gradually move them up this curve to the happy user peak, and then through feedback loops, gather data to be able to know when they've hit that so that you don't start gold plating and over-delivering, thereby burying the functionality that they found helpful in the first place. Now, so often, teams are asked to provide estimations for an effort, usually with varying degrees of inaccuracy. Who's been through this? Yeah, so let me ask you guys, how many jelly beans do you guys see in that jar? Anybody? Oh, perfect. Thank you, Bill. What about that one? I went ahead and changed the jar, I changed the size of the jelly bean, and I dumped out a whole bag around the base of it. Anybody? Nothing? Right? Holy smokes, this jar looks way better, and those jelly beans look way more tasty. How many jelly beans do you see in this jar? Right? So teams can suffer from estimation paralysis, right? How many of you have been through this? And it gets in the way of being able to execute and deliver those products out there to the customer. And so if you have been through this, you know it can be very painful. It causes a lot of start and stop. It causes a lot of churn. And when you really get down to it, in most cases, how frequently does that drastically change your end state actuals on that deliverable? And so we introduced the concept of relative sizing, which really gathers how complex is this work, not how much time is it going to take you to deliver this work. And then really, as we're dividing up the different minimally viable products across the full feature set, we are then putting that relative size on these items, and then the product owner and Scrum Master can work together to really build a roadmap of when can I start getting these deliverables out there to the customer. In addition to that, one other thing that we found helpful was making sure that we take a vertical slice of the work. So let me ask you, how many of you guys have seen work broken out in this way, where one card definitely takes care of the user interface, another would be the service layer, a third might be the persistence layer? I know I've seen this quite a bit as I've gone through and with new teams getting into this mentality. And so what I kind of come in and do is say, guys, we need to enable a continuous delivery one card at a time. So I want to make sure that I put that customer front and center, and I take a vertical slice so that I can deliver a card at a time should I so see the value in that. And then furthermore, I don't want to hold back the full requirement to fully gold plate it. I want to go ahead and go with what I know today and get that rolling into your development. And so then, as we build this out the first time, we'll build a persisted requirements library across that capability. And then the next time that we have any changes going on, we're going to go ahead and pull that back up and only tweak the items that are affected. Think about your speed to market and the amount of rework that you just went ahead and pushed aside. Now, visibility is a big deal when you get into Agile. Sometimes you walk into dev team spaces and there's no visibility into the work that they are doing. And so if anybody's ever read Dominica DeGrandis's book, Making Work Visible, huge fan, it was a big helper. And it was one of the items that I used when I decided to go ahead and figure out how do I show an end-to-end value stream visibility from product concept all the way to implementation so that I can do, as Courtney recommended, a value stream map, find my constraints and my bottlenecks and figure out how do I optimize my flow and show my clear priorities, my dependencies mapped out on the story map, set my WIP limits so that I can get an even distribution of work across the entire spectrum. Clear time box goals. If you can figure out a good way of getting a continuous plan going to get rid of those IPMs, it really does work. And then continuous improvement inside of every iteration. I think we've seen a theme of this across the day of figuring out how do I reduce my friction so that my developers are very happy in my code base. And then creating that pull system that really enables that accelerated delivery velocity. Now, asset readiness and best practices to enable a continuous delivery. One of the items that we did introduce to some of the teams that we work with as they go through agile transformations is this idea of acceptance test-driven development. One of my favorite reactions to this was somebody literally paused and goes, "You have to test after you develop." And so we had to kind of take a step back and figure out what is this tool and how do we leverage it and what are the different things that we need to do to set up so that we can prepare to actually implement this. And really the entire reason that we found this incredibly helpful was it places that emphasis on collaboration between the team members and the product owner to have that common understanding of what to implement. And so you build your acceptance criteria, you automate against the acceptance criteria, not the code, and you develop until automation is green, and then you refactor to optimize your code. And what we found was this helped us implement cleaner code so that every single time we built in that section of the code base, one, we already had that in the automation suite, two, we had clean code to work through, so we didn't have to really do a lot of detective work to figure out what that code was doing. And then the last thing that really drove that continuous improvement and that reduction of friction inside of every iteration was something called an improvement kata. Has anybody ever implemented an improvement kata where they work? All right, so, yes. So, problem statement. You always want to start with your problem statement, right? What is it that we are trying to solve? And then you let the team define their definition of awesome. Where are unicorns jumping over rainbows for this team, right? And then what's next? What is my first step, my foundational thing that I need to do in order to enable this and get a step from A a little bit closer to Z? And then time box a set of goals that you come back and visit in that 4 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever that time box is, and say, guys, where did we land? And that way you can actually visualize your progress and see that things are getting better, even though it's still not great yet, but we know where we're going. Now, as agile transformations mature over time, scaling requires organizations to alter operating models and organizational structures to empower those delivery teams. Entrepreneurialism is risky, and encouraging teams to innovate, learn their products, hone their skill sets, well, that allows them to better serve their customers and, in the end, better serve their company. Now, teams are the test centers for agile evolution, but great initiatives go unheard of without publicizing their successes and encouraging others to work toward that same organizational goal. And so, Gemba Walks are a tool that can be leveraged to support the grassroots adoption of best practices and enabling a generative culture shift. If you're thinking about leveraging this, it's not just dev teams going to see what other dev teams are doing. It is your executive leadership, your sponsorship of that agile transformation also coming in and making sure that they are learning and seeing what the teams are doing, and definitely making sure to provide accolades for those good practices. And so this is where you really get your grit and your traction, and where your top down and your bottom up can start to meet in the middle. And with every agile transformation, you're going to have capability uplift. And the 3 sections that I always contend are the best sections to focus on would be business acumen, technology, and leadership. And so really, if you think about it, you've integrated business and IT closer together, and you've oriented these product teams around a product. And so how best to really make sure that you optimize that than making sure that you groom the business acumen of every single individual on that team. And furthermore, as you orient these folks around a product, there's probably going to be a little bit of a different tech stack that they're going to have to make sure to develop across. And so from that perspective, you want to make sure that you have an environment where folks feel like they can learn and grow and make mistakes and learn from those things again, creating that T-shaped person instead of that I-shaped employee, where you get not just the breadth of information, but also depth of information. And then furthermore, now that you have your business partners there, you want to make sure to bring them along for the journey so that they better understand the technology that's supporting their new feature set that's going out. And they can also make sure to partner and pair and figure out what needs to be done next to this product stack so that I can get this next thing coming out the door out to our customers. And then furthermore, you always want to make sure that you can empower your teams. And so grooming the leader in every single one of them and that servant leadership and making sure that they feel comfortable making decisions there localized in the team space, that that's a safe place. That's one of the things that really, really makes sure that you have that connection and that overall engagement. So one of our biggest aha moments in the previous place where I was party to an agile transformation was that our product is not only what's delivered to the customer, it's also the delivery pipeline that supported its implementation. And what we found is if we have a really unhealthy pipeline, we experience a lot of delays and a lot of rework and a lot of unnecessary friction to be able to continue to deliver those new feature sets. And so what we found was we really needed to prioritize both new feature sets, technical debt, continuous improvement, and defects all together in one bucket in order to make sure that everything has its shining star moment and really to make sure that we have that healthy pipeline to deliver those features. Now, everything's not always rosy as you enter into agile transformation. You almost always will run into different challenges on the journey, both from a C-suite perspective as well as from the grassroots team perspective. And so one of the things with getting started that you could run into is figuring out, what is my value stream? And there's going to be a lot of different ideas. And so really, sometimes you have to get out of analysis paralysis, give it a go, and then learn from that and figure out, do I now need to redefine or not? And then setting common goals between business and IT. I know that I said this in the beginning, but this can't be understated, because if your business area has one idea in mind of where they're going and your IT has another idea in mind and there is no connection across the two of them, you've already lost in your agile transformation. You have to make sure that you have that common goal and that you both are working toward that common goal. Making data-driven decisions. So sometimes when you've entered into the agile transformation, you realize that I need to figure out how my products are actually operating out there, and oh gosh, I don't even know where to start. And so figuring out how to, one, surface that data, and then two, interpret that data, and then three, make decisions based off of that data can be really hard, because sometimes your rock stars that were there previous to the agile transformation, when you really dive into the data, you find out it's actually not as successful as we thought. And that's a really hard pill to swallow sometimes. And so you do have to have a great deal of empathy when you really surface this and figure out the best way to move forward. And then, in addition, another pain point that can happen across business and IT is prioritizing all the work in one bucket. So you have all of these value streams, and it's easy to prioritize within a value stream. But what about across value streams? Oftentimes, this is where some of the hardest decisions have to get made. And then adapting to interaction model changes. As folks really get that mindset shift and they start really connecting to the work, they're going to have different interaction models, different interactions, and they're going to grow and mature, and they're going to be doing the work differently. And as a result, they're going to be sometimes needing to either change how they work with an individual, or they're going to have to change who they're working with in order to make sure to optimize the overall solution. You're almost always going to have resource constraints in every single place you go. So what is the best way of making sure that you pinpoint what those constraints are? And then again, how do you create an environment where folks can learn and grow, not just increasing the breadth of information that they know, but also the depth of information that they know. If I'm a product owner today, what prevents me from going out there and learning some of the automations so that if I need to go out there and help my team, I can do so? If I'm an analyst today, what's going to prevent me from going out there and learning how to do some simple coding if I need to pick up a simple card and keep it moving along? That's a little scary for folks because they really feel like they're outside of their wheelhouse. And then also uncovering dark work or invisible work. We all know that it exists, and it's one of the hardest things to pinpoint as the time theft item. So we really want to make sure to figure out, how do we visualize our work and how do we break these things up? And then also, how do we divert these things to the right place so that they aren't continuing to create a stall in our current process? Adopting inner sourcing. This is another thing where sometimes you can go into an asset and realize that there's such a strong ownership. There is a lot of, hey, get off my carpet square type mentality, and you have to really talk through it and figure out, how do I really introduce this so that I can start decoupling and I can start reducing my overall dependencies. And then consolidating test strategies and frameworks. This is another one. Sometimes you can roll into a company and see there's like 150 frameworks with 1 million different test strategies. Other times they have a very succinct test strategy, but it may not be the right one to enable a speed to market. So these are all conversations that have to happen, But then my personal favorite, which is the last one, implementing an adaptive funding model. So if you think about it, we go through these rigid annual funding cycles where we go ahead and say about a half a year before the year begins, all right, this is the next set of work that we're going to fund all next year. But think about how fast the digital marketplace is moving and the needs of the customers and how that is changing and all the disruption that is happening in the market. And so sometimes figuring out a way of getting that adaptive funding model so that on a quarterly basis you can do a gut check of, am I still working on the right things for the market and for the customer? That is something that's definitely a real challenge and to get people to wrap their heads around. So the main point of contention that I'm making here is that if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And business and IT are in this together. And not only do you need that top-down support of your agile transformation, but you also need to get momentum in your grassroots adoption of your agile transformation to meet up in the middle. And so, guys, it's all about working as one team. Thank you.
Awesome. Kristen, do you want to take a couple of questions? We've got about 4 minutes to
Sure.
play with. All right, anybody have any questions for Kristen? Go on in the back.
You mentioned adapting to interaction and support model changes, so I was wondering if you could speak a little more to that along your journey.
I'm sorry, say that one more time, adapting.
Adapting to the interaction and support models through
yes.
the changes and how the teams must interact through the agile transformation.
Absolutely. So if you think about the different roles that interact together as you're moving through the life cycle, some of the things that we realized was, for instance, in a previous role, I was a Scrum Master. And as I figured out a way of defining a new cross-functional team and getting our business partners more involved, I found that the team was really led by both the product owner and the Scrum Master, and it was that paired co-leadership of that team that really started to get that zoom and that grit. And so I started realizing that I was interacting, one, differently with my product owner, but then two, differently with my team members. My product owner was also interacting differently with my team members because we were doing solutioning right there in the team. It wasn't something that was handed directly to us. And then furthermore, our project managers in this model, we do interact a little bit differently with our project managers, and we're basically saying, I know we're going to create a translation layer here where people are going to feel like the team is funded, even though we are on this rigid annual funding cycle and we are doing a project-based funding cycle, funding model, excuse me. But as a result of that mask that we have to put over it in order to make the team feel like, hey, the team is funded, it's not the project that's funded, and they don't really know which project we're working on. They know what product we're working on. But then that interaction between the project manager, the Scrum Master, also changed as well as a result of that. And so one of the main things that I would also put out there is that now I'm on the business side of the house. And so as a product owner, I'm really saying, hey, I'm rolling into a company now that isn't used to a product owner sitting with the team. And so already we've changed the interaction model. They aren't used to actually having the product owner come over to their desk and sit down with them. The product managers aren't used to having to hand off a problem statement and a goal and let the product owner help solution that with the team. And so everybody has this weird flux of trying to figure out, there's a little bit of gray area for me while I haven't quite made that connection with it and that mindset shift. But I know I have to do this differently. And so leveraging data to make that data-driven decision is a different thing. And so now our product managers suddenly have a whole new interaction with our data scientists that we brought in. So when we talk about those interaction models, it might evolve or it could change depending on the different tools that we're providing the team. And so I always say that
you can provide all the tools and all the processes in the world to really streamline and make sure that you have that speed to market. But until you get that mindset shift and that connection with it, you're really not going to reap the ultimate benefit from it. And when you do have that, that's where you're really going to start seeing that interaction model really morph and shift.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kristen.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. The reason why we have food to eat is thanks to our sponsors. So we're going to take a brief moment to learn more about what they're doing. So first, we're going to introduce MC with Contrast Security. MC.
Thank you. Didn't have a whole lot of time to prep for this, so I'm going to try to keep this to 1 minute. My name is MC Rita. I'm a sales engineer for Contrast Security. What we do is we protect web applications from vulnerabilities. We are the market leader in this space. It's an acronym called IAST, Interactive Application Security Testing. What that essentially means, and why that's different than what you may already have in-house, old school static analysis is a build time technology. It takes a while to get those results because you have to wait for the build to finish. You also don't have the context of runtime, so it tends to have a lot of false positive. It also has a lot of false negatives and things that we don't necessarily want to fix, but it takes time and money to find all of those things. Traditional dynamic analysis can see the data that's going into the application, but it can't necessarily see how that application uses it, whether that data is definitely going to be a problem or not. So for example, we have a demo out in the hall where we show a SQL injection, and we also show that when the data that's passed in is correct, we don't bring down the application. When the data that's passed in is an obvious SQL injection, we alert you that there's a problem. The types of problems that we find can be everything from the aforementioned SQL injection, cross-site scripting, but also anything that will make the application less secure. Is your level of encryption high enough? Is your web application set up to be compromised by someone? We also address all different portions of the DevOps lifecycle. So we're going to integrate into your IDE where the developers work. We're obviously going to be integrating in environments, continuous build environments to find problems there. And we're also going to protect you at runtime as well. What else? Shift left, finding those problems as quickly as possible, protecting production, and I would look forward very much to having a more in-depth discussion with anyone who wants to stop by. It's about 60 seconds.
Thanks, MC. Now we're welcoming Josh with Red Hat.
Hello, my name is Josh with Red Hat. We're here as a sponsor. If you haven't heard of Red Hat, you'd love to come back and pontificate about the recent news, particularly around IBM. If you're interested in the cultural change that's required to enable open source technologies, we are the company that brings community to open source and participation. We'd love to talk containers, Ansible, automation, security, all of the things. We've got Patrick, Brad, myself, and Paul. Feel free to stop by. If everybody's, any certified professionals in the room? No? I see one. You don't count, Patrick. But come by. We also have training. We host a lot of workshops, and I look forward to having everybody come out and say hi and tell us what you're doing, what's working, what's not working, and see if we can't help you out. Thanks everybody for coming, and I want to get in the way of lunch, so have a good one.
Thanks, Josh. Josh has actually presented to my group, Lops of Columbus, before. He knows his stuff. Now I'd like to welcome Chase. Please welcome Chase.
Good morning, Columbus. My name is Anatoly. I'm with JP Morgan Chase. I do DevOps and engineering at JP Morgan Consumer Bank. So we're here primarily for one reason, to look for the best and brightest. And I see a full room of them. If you're interested in a career at Chase, we have a table in a foyer. Please stop by, talk to our recruiters, technical guys. We have boss there. They'll tell you the pitch. They'll give you the pitch, but they'll tell you the real thing, how it works. Just one note, Chase is not like stuffy old bank like it had been 20 years ago. We are far forward now, doing very cool stuff. Robotics, anybody? You wouldn't think banks do robotics, we actually do that. Please come forward. And we're probably going to have the best-in-class campus in Polaris soon. So it does great renovation right now. It's going to be probably rivals Google's and Netflix's and whatnot in the world. Please stop by. Thanks.
Big thanks to the folks who feed us. Now Bill's going to take us into the open spaces preparation.
Yeah, I have no idea what we're doing with open spaces. I thought Ducey was handling it. I wasn't even thinking about it. Yeah, I texted him.
Is this one on?
No, this one.
All right. Well, while we're trying to find someone to explain open spaces to you, let me tell you what we're having for lunch. My name is Renee. I'm one of the organizers. I don't know if you've noticed, we're trying to have the organizers take turns and get up here. So this is my turn. So as soon as we get done explaining open spaces to you, then we're going to head down the hallway to the ballroom, and we'll have lunch. Your choices today are a Caribbean chicken wrap and a roast beef baguette, and then there's some kind of vegetarian option. And the seating, we've got the entire ballroom, we've got the club room, we've got the patio with some chairs set up out there. So hopefully you get enough to eat at lunch. Thanks.
Thanks, Renee.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, is it me?
Yeah, you're good. You're up.
All right. I guess I'm not allowed to move. It's also like very loud. Hello. Anyway, I'll just hold it way down here. Jesus. It's throwing me off. Like, seriously. Yeah. Okay, that's a little bit better. So, we have open spaces this afternoon. Who's familiar with open spaces? All right. Lots of veterans. Who's not familiar with open spaces? That would mean everyone else has to raise their hand. Right. All right. So, here's what open spaces are. So in the guidebook application, which I need to pull up, if you look in your guidebook application, there should be a poll. So this is really important that everyone who wants to participate in open spaces needs to download the guidebook application if you haven't already. You might ask yourself, how do I do that? Well, you go to your representative app store and search for guidebook, and you download the application, and then you'll be like, whoa, I don't have my program. So what you then do is you then go and scan that QR code on the back of your badge, and it will add in the program for Devopsdays. Now, there's some pieces of information that are in the guidebook that are not on the devopsdays.org website, such as what rooms are talks in, where are rooms located, and other things like that as well. But if you go into the application, there is a poll somewhere. Where's the poll? Where's the poll? There isn't a poll. If there isn't a poll, then how are we going to do this? Did John turn the poll on? Where's it at, John? Oh, open spaces, right there. And then you can go and suggest ideas. So you pull down the hamburger menu, you scroll until you see open spaces. By the way, did you know that's called a hamburger menu? I didn't know that. And then you can go in and make suggestions. And then while you do that during lunch, we're going to tabulate the responses, and then you can also vote on things as well. So we're going to allow you to vote on which topics that you want to discuss. And so you might ask yourself, well, this makes no sense. What is an open space? So what an open space is you're going to have the opportunity to discuss a topic that's not on the agenda. We're going to come up with the topic now, and then you and maybe 10 to 15 of your bestest friends that you just made today are going to go into one of the rooms that we've allocated for open spaces, and you'll discuss that topic. There's no set agenda other than the topic at hand. If you, at any point in time, feel like that you're not getting something out of that topic or out of that room, you are more than welcome to use whatever means of mobility that you have and leave that room and go find another room, or go find a talk that you want to listen to, or anything else that you would rather do than sit in that room. No one will be offended. So that's another thing, is like no one's allowed to get offended if somebody gets up and leaves. And so this is what open spaces is. It's one of the core tenets of Devopsdays. It's the original founding way that you run a DevOpsdays was talks in the morning and then open spaces in the afternoon. And we've changed the program a little bit in that we're going to have open spaces, and then we're going to have choice of workshops and then talks in here as well. So it's really important that you download the app, you put in your suggestions, and we're going to tabulate those suggestions. And then we're going to open up a poll, and then everyone's going to vote. And then we'll let you know by the time the Ignites are over, we'll let you know what open space topics have been accepted and where those open spaces are going to be. Any questions? Did I not explain that correctly? I'm like so confused from the microphone being so loud. Yes, ma'am. Oh, that's a good thing. This is the second time I've had this question. So the question was, if you look in the guidebook, there's 4 talks going on at the same time in the exact same room. What is this nonsense? So those are called, did I lose the mic? I think it got turned down. Thank you. So those are called Ignites. So those are 4 talks that are 5 minutes long. There are 20 slides. They auto-advance until they are done. And so it can be terrifying for the speaker. It can be extremely fun for the speaker. It can be entertaining for the audience. And the other good thing is that if the topic isn't, like, sometimes vendors get up here and do a vendor pitch during the Ignite. Well, if it's a vendor pitch, luckily it only lasts 5 minutes. I mean, I like our sponsors and all. I work for one of the sponsors, but you know. Anyway, so that's what those are. Any other questions that we can answer for you before we break for lunch? We're breaking for lunch, right? Yep. All right. I'm sorry, I didn't want to like mess up the agenda. Any other questions on open spaces or anything else on the program? All right. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the morning.